From the News Channel 5 Network, this is Morning Line with Nick Barris.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on Morning Line. I am, of course, Nick Barris, and today, all right, it is Wednesday, and we've got a good show, or Tuesday. Gosh, I'm getting ahead of myself. This week, I was telling our guest, who you'll meet in a moment, that allergies are kind of clogging my ears and such, but making it through the day, and I hope you're feeling well and you're joining us in the conversation. We're going to get the phone number up in a moment, talking about a topic that we do certainly on occasion here. It's always something worth talking about. Domestic violence, women in need, the help that is out there, and some of the laws on the books, and they continue to change, I think, toward the goal of making things safer for women. And it's a very important topic to this show, and I think it should be important to all of us individually. The YWCA does an amazing job of that, and there's some new topics along those lines we want to talk about, and you're going to have a chance to join, as I said, in the conversation as you listen in. But we're glad to have with us President and CEO. She's been on before, Sharon Roberson. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Nick. Glad to be here.
Nice to have you on. Well, listen, I'm not sure exactly where to start first, but for the very few perhaps out there that aren't as familiar with the YWCA as perhaps they should be, they know about the YMCA, which is very different. Talk about what the goals and missions are of the YWCA.
Well, first of all, the YWCA in Nashville and Middle Tennessee is a 122-year organization.
Wow.
We've been around a long time, and most of those years we've been involved in empowering women. We have sought to keep women and children in our communities safe, and that is our goal. Our stated mission is eliminating racism, empowering women, promoting peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. And we go about that mission in many ways. Our largest program by far is our Weaver Domestic Violence Center and the services wrapped around that program. And that goal is to keep women and children in Nashville and Middle Tennessee safe.
The question of domestic violence, I'm curious, how did things change during the pandemic with regard to that?
We knew early on, especially with our sister YWs across the country, that everyone was not safer at home. It's almost as if you had a pandemic of domestic violence within the COVID-19 pandemic. The reason for that is a lot of the safety and support that women and children had during the pandemic disappeared. We no longer had teachers that were looking after children. We no longer had people going into the workforce. So there was this powder keg of emotions
They all stayed home.
And stress at home. And so the actual number of cases increased, as well as the severity of cases.
Here in the Middle Tennessee region, were there fatalities over the last year?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, there have been, and that's unfortunate. One thing that we are part of at the YW, we are part of a group that tries to deconstruct cases to see if there is any community response that might be greater so that we can prevent these from happening in the future.
Okay. One of the things, and we're going to talk a lot and cover bases and take calls, but you wanted to come on to talk about it, and something that I didn't even really realize. I mean, it happens at home, as you just talked about, oftentimes. And perhaps there's a situation where there is a woman and their child, and the home they're in, they want to get out of, but there's a lease.
Yes.
And the abuser knows where they live, and because of the lease, they can't leave. So, of course, the abuser knows where to find them. What's changing with that? Right? It was crazy when Mary Elena was telling me about this. I was thinking, wow, that actually gets some people stuck in a place where they can't escape because of a stupid lease.
Yes.
Unbelievable. I would say bye to the lease, see you in court. I mean, if I'm worried about running from an abuser, but go ahead.
Well, but that's easy to say, but very difficult from a legal perspective. First of all, I want to thank Senator Brenda Gilmore, who championed us on this effort. What we came to her with is a situation where it happened during COVID.
Okay.
We had an individual that was in a lease agreement. She was staying at our Weaver Center. she owed money on the lease, but she could not live in that apartment because, first of all, her abuser was physically there.
Oh, he was still there?
Yeah, her abuser, who was arrested and going through the court system, knew where she was, wanted to find her.
Was there an order of protection in place?
Yes.
But of course,
yes.
That's only as good as the paper it's written on.
Yes, but the person keeps coming back because they know where you are. So this law is very simple, and it is really a law that is not oppressive for landlords, but it helps domestic violence and sexual assault and stalk victims greatly. What this provides is that starting July 1, 2021, is already in effect. Okay. Any lease that is signed after that date provides that an individual who is a victim of domestic violence, sexual assault, or stalking can show proof to their landlord. You have to have your documentation of your order of protection or court orders or arrest records. Okay. You show that to them in written form, and you have a 30-day period which you can get out of your lease arrangements. It's not oppressive, it's not difficult. You do have to disclose this to your landlord.
And they're supposed to then understand that and allow
let you out of the lease, yes, without penalty.
Okay.
And so it is a tremendous help because it saves lives.
Can you tell me how were things resolved with this one case you were telling me about?
Actually, she was able to because she was before the law was passed. Yeah. But we, at an informal basis with our wonderful advocate at the Weaver Center, was able to actually work with a landlord that on their own really decided to work with this individual and allow them out of the lease arrangement. Because when you see the facts of these cases, it is self-evident that these individuals need support and help.
Wow, I think that's great. So that's in effect now. Again, that seems, I mean, I don't know. I think it definitely helps, but does that affect a lot? I mean, how many of these victims are in a situation like that? That's just another piece of the puzzle. Yes. I would not imagine there's thousands of them like in that situation not able to get out of a lease.
Correct.
But it's part of the puzzle, and this is something that needed to be addressed.
Yes, and it was really one of those things that no one really thought about, and is not, as you say, may not affect many, but it will affect those that it affects greatly.
And again, maybe talk about how that is. Getting away from the abuser can be difficult. There can be orders of protection. There could have been an incident where the individual was hurt, and they go back to the place where they live. That's why you have a shelter, right?
Yes.
Because at some point, where is the determination made, okay, it's just not safe for you there, despite the order of protection, you're coming to our secret shelter?
Yes. And when we have, we have a 24-hour call line and text line. We added the text line right before COVID. And when you call and you give your specific facts, because every case of domestic violence is very specific, and our case managers, our domestic violence specialists, can walk you through your case and determine whether or not your case is one such that you should seek shelter. If you don't want shelter, we'll help you design a safety plan. But if you do want shelter, we'll make a space for you.
How serious? Can you give me an idea of what the criteria is when someone calls in where you'll say, you know what, we need to move now?
Well, for instance, as an example, strangulation. Okay. If you've ever been strangled by someone, that case has the potential for becoming lethal in the future. And so that's something to be very much concerned about. If someone has said that they might kill you or kill themselves if you leave them, that's a very dangerous situation. And so those kinds of things, there's actually a program that we have with the Metro Nashville Police Department, the lethality assessment program. And there's a series of questions that police officers will ask an individual at a domestic violence call. And based on their responses, you can determine whether or not they need to talk to a counselor. If they talk to that counselor can determine whether or not you need shelter.
Do you have a handle on, just for instance, ballpark, how many calls come in a month, either to that line or to the YWCA? I'm talking about calls, people saying, I need help.
Well, last year we had over 5,000 calls. And that's not counting the texts. We had about 1,000 more if you add the texts. Now, we did have a huge jump in calls during COVID, so that's part of that spike. But The calls range from everyone that just wants information to family members that are saying, I know this is going on, but I'm afraid to go over there because they fear for their own safety, or the children have said something to someone that's just a friend. What can I do? So there are a lot of reasons to call this. You don't have to be the victim yourself.
That's a great point.
You could call if you're a friend or a neighbor or someone that just wants the information.
Okay, we'll take a break on that note. When we come back, I want to remind folks, we'll be putting the phone number and contact information for these lines and such throughout the program if you want to get a pen and paper. And her point is a good one. It's not always just the victims specifically themselves. You could have a loved one that you observe this happening to, but you can't get involved safely and you need to reach out for help.
Correct.
You can make the call. A child can make a call. A neighbor can make a call. So we'll take a break. When we come back, the number 737-7587. Also want to talk next when we come back about the training that can be put in place under some legislation on how to spot victims of spousal abuse. We'll take a break and be back with more right after this.